Hello and welcome to another special video here with Farv again. Hey Farv, how you doing?
I'm alright.
You know what we're talking about today, Farv? We're talking about the argument that I've seen when people complain about the Primaris, and this is one
Hmm.
that I always see in every comment section, and it's always the argument of, it's a revamp. You should be happy. You're just spoiled for complaining. When
Yeah,
the
bull.
actual problem is that I think a good chunk of them, I'm going to not say they're deliberately doing it. I'm going to be generous, and I'm going to say that vast majority of them don't seem to understand the difference between a revamp and a replacement. Would you agree with that?
Maybe. Maybe with some people don't understand, but not with you being so generous about it. I think a lot of people know exactly
So
what it
you think
is.
more people are being malicious?
I think they're just being disingenuous because they don't want to defend their own preference against,
So
the legitimate argument.
So just in case people don't know what I'm talking about, I'll go over it real quick. A revamp would be closer to what has occurred with the Eldar line, where they have updated units as they were before, but in a better scale, and in a lot of cases in a medium being plastic as
Yeah.
opposed to fail cast. That's a revamp. A replacement is what we would do is we'd call the Primaris. They are there to replace and deliberately replace the older line by not actually replicating what was there,
They're
but
there to make you have to buy a
effectively,
whole new ass army.
yeah, it's so that there's this is the reason I think it's important because you using older models is not generally something people are going to care too much if they're the same model as the new one.
Yeah.
There might be some people who like it's ew, it's old, but there's not generally a problem. With a
Yeah.
revamp, they're going to be irritated because a tactical squad is not an intercessor squad. Now, I
No.
understand some people will have friendly games with people they know, but this is not going to fly in Warhammer stores, official tournaments. And there's, in fact, a large contingent of people in Warhammer as a hobby who will also not take it. So, in my opinion, it's a really bad argument because we enter into a situation where it's not them simply giving us a better proportioned, newer update to an older kit. It's them going, you're going to have to buy this new thing because we're completely
Hmm.
getting rid of the old one. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, they're deliberately limiting availability, and scalpers haven't helped with that either, as far as getting stuff on the aftermarket.
So, what I think you have, for example, is let's use the new Space Wolf uh, redo or whatever you want to call it. Their presentation.
They're
A good
alleged revamps.
a good chunk of it is literally them taking. I'm going to guess there's half the options in the box, but for the most part, it's them taking the old pack box and updating it. And they did a good job, as much as I can criticize it. It's a good update for what it is. If you're Primaris, if you're me, you just go whatever. But
Well, if you're not a Primaris fanboy, then it means nothing to you because it's just more Primarified fucking like Marines.
yeah, it's in keeping with the new Marines, not the OG Marines,
Yeah.
and it's less of the thing we're talking about. Now, they did add new things to it, which is also annoying for some people. But what I think the problem ends up being is when you look at that, you go, okay, well, what was the whole point of Primaris? They don't even mention Primaris when they talk about these guys, by the way.
No.
They do their damnedest to not talk about it. And they even have a lot, one of the groups actually just carrying bolters,
Eh.
and I'm not going to call them bolt carbines, they're bolters. They're the appropriately scaled weapon for that
Well,
level of
it's
Marine.
it's actually another example of what we're talking about. It's the original thing just renamed something else so they can justify their other weird design.
Well, it's because they didn't want to call them bolters, and they wanted to, the replacement needed to be different enough that you couldn't just foster it out or, you know, use the older version and go, I'm not buying your dumb new thing. And
Yeah.
that's what I think the big problem ends up being is that when we make arguments in a lot of these spaces, and especially when we're talking about Warhammer,
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of people who will not say what it simply is. I would respect more of these Primaris fans if they just said, "Hey, look, it sucks, but this is a straight up replacement," and that's all it ever was. It was a lie when Games Workshop said, "It's not a replacement, it's an addition.
Yeah,
They'll
bullshit.
be perfectly fine to work with your." No, I would
And then you
respect
see
people.
example after example after example where either GW themselves or a bunch of players like, well, you can't use that. It's not Primaris. It's not current edition.
Yeah, and I think that once we understand this argument that we're not talking revamps, nobody's that divided that the Elder got a revamp. Most people are like, hey, that's good. There's some people who say, I like the older sculpts better.
Which
But
is
they're not
fair.
having to
That's a
make an
fair
argument.
argument. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They're not having to make an argument going, well, I like tactical Marines. Well, I don't
Hmm.
want intercessors. They're something wholly different
Yeah, they're a
than,
complete replacement, like we were saying.
yeah. Because those are two different things, and I think it would be a lot better for people when they're making arguments to just be honest about these things. And as frustrating as it is, it's what this thing has been, and it's even worse that they've tried to shove this down people's throats so
Yeah.
hard. When you look at other lines and go, well, why are they just getting a revamp? If the revamp worked fine by just giving people the old thing in a better scale,
Then
why
why do you
didn't it
keep
work
trying
with
to
Space
replace
Marines?
entire lines of Space Marines? And let's be honest, we know why. Because Space Marines are their poster boys for selling merchandise, and so they want to just pimp them out as hard as they can, as often as they can. So by pushing the Marine players who are their biggest and I'm sorry, whiniest player base, they're pushing all this Primaris shit for the fanboys, and they're like, yeah, here's more of this, buy it, buy it, buy it. While everybody else is like, what the fuck?
Well, I probably don't agree at it being the whiniest part of the fan base, but I do
Well,
agree
recently I
that
feel like they
it's
have
the
been.
most overly served. And this is Fang. For anyone who's going to make the argument, oh, you're just complaining because you play Space Marines.
But
Okay.
I don't. I don't play Space Marines. When I played Warhammer at all, I played Guard and Sisters and occasionally Orcs.
Yeah, he does do that. I'm just saying from my end of things. And
Yeah.
the argument I'm making is I've actually was actually arguing before 7th edition that the Space Marine line was too big and needed to be brought down. The Primaris have been nothing but an offense towards that whole thing, and well, I think it's only gotten worse. But I'm sorry for this, guys. But we're gonna have to call this one short because I got some things to deal with. My mother's dog's getting ready to go into the vet. We're hoping he's gonna be okay. So,
And we
hey, any well
apologize for the
wishes if
AC
you
noise
agree or
also.
not, please let us know. And sorry, Farv. Go ahead.
I also apologize for the sudden noise from the AC there.
Yeah. So, thanks, Sarah, everybody, for joining us, and have a great week. Bye bye.
Hi there, everybody.